Dina was washing up when the doorbell rang. One baccarat glass left. The set of 4 had been a wedding gift from her mother, presented with a sigh and a look. The small blue glass reflected the morning light, and soap suds ran along its surface. The bell was insistent, one long, shrill ring. She rinsed the glass and placed it on the draining board, drying her hands before going upstairs. It was the smell that hit her first, intensely fragrant, almost indecent. The flowers took up the width of the doorframe, spilling out of his arms and obscuring his face. "Hello, Jean." The foliage nodded and pushed past her into the hall. "What lovely azaleas! How kind!" She pressed against the hall as leaf and petal tickled her cheek. His head disappeared down the stairs, crowned by a halo of frills. A vulgar colour, Katerina might say, and Dina would have to agree. "What are we going to do with these?" Jean sat at the table. The flowers lay in a mound before him. It was an enormous bunch, far too large for one vase. In fact, now she examined it, she noticed the clods of earth and excess of greenery. He tipped his face toward her when she spoke, looking just above her left eyebrow. "I've got it. Lots of vases all around the room. I'll have myself my very own flower shop. What a treat." His mouth twitched, and he resumed staring at his hands. His pudding bowl hair hung low over his forehead, sunlight turning it white. She got the secateurs. Sounds from neighbouring houses drifted through, a vacuum on one side, a telly on the other. The air in the room felt close. "Dina, can I have a glass of water?" "Of course." She was cleaning the stems and clipping off leaves. He went to the sink and picked up the baccarat glass. He filled it and drank the water in one gulp, filled and drank several times. Dina had her back turned when she heard the smash. For such a delicate thing, it made quite a noise. And what a mess. Shards everywhere. Jean stood looking at the ground. Her hands were full with flowers. "There was a fly," he said, "a big one, a big fly." He repeated as she got the dustpan and brush. "Not to worry." Her voice remained bright, but what would she do with a set of 3? "Not to worry at all. Why don't you sit down and I'll make us both a cup of tea." He stood, watching her sweep and rubbing his arm. A huge, horrid fly. She wrapped the glass in yesterday's paper and put it in the bin, then filled the kettle. Jean shifted his weight against the countertop and looked out of the window. As the kettle boiled, Dina filled vases, 5 in total, and an old coffee pot. "Do you want to find a place for this?" She offered Jean a vase. "No, thank you, Dina," he said and walked quickly out of the room. She arranged the flowers. Gaudy pink crowded every surface, filling the space with its scent. She sighed and opened a window. When Jean came back, he had paper and pencils with him. "You're off soon," Dina said, as she drew a large fez and folded over her sheet of paper, taking Jean's already folded piece. She drew the face of a fat, smiling man where he'd left little markers. "How are you feeling?" "Mum says I have to cut my hair. Probably regulations. The thing is, I'm going bald." She paused, curling moustache half drawn. "Jeannie, I don't think so." "I am, at the front." I can't see that I am." He was filling something in, pressing the pencil into the paper in a way that would surely leave a mark on the table. "Well, I think it'll be nice to see some of your face." He passed her his paper, and she finished her mustachioed face, folding it over and giving it to him. "Do you feel a bit worried about school?" "Mum won't tell me if I'll like it." "Well, it's meant to be lovely, in the countryside." Then, after a pause, "It won't be like the others. I think you'll do all sorts of things, like drawing and being outdoors. But will I like it?" "Well, no one can really tell you that, but I'm sure you'll have a good time." She drew a mermaid's tail for bottoms. "Promise?" She was silent. It was a new thing, this, the promising. "I think you're great, and so does Emma, and Carl, and your mum. That's 4 friends you've got already, right?" He nodded. "And you made them by yourself, so I expect you'll make lots more when you're there." "But I'm starting in the middle of term." Did your mum ever tell you how I came to Chelsea? He shook his head. Well, it was in the middle of summer term, just like now. My mother was organising my coming out ball, and I knew that if I went through with it, I would simply die. I ran away to art school and I met your mum, and I begged her to interview me. She said no, so I showed her some drawings, and she said absolutely not. But then I told her my story, and you know what Katerina is like. She probably said all right for a laugh. I started the next week, mid-term. Nobody batted an eyelash. She paused. Thank God it had paid off. Those broad rooms with their high ceilings and sharp light. Katerina moving among the desks, tutting over your shoulder or, sometimes, laughing outright in your face. At the end of year, she bribed the janitor and went through the exam hall, adding a touch of colour or a few more lines. The course had the highest pass rate at the school. Jean was watching her. Are you done with yours? She asked. Let's look at them. They unfurled the pieces of paper. Well, how divine! I think I'll keep Mr. Banana McBottom Pants and Lady Hula of the Sixth Kingdom. Have you shown your mum your drawing? You're getting good. And as an afterthought, I bet there'll be fishing there at the school. His eyes narrowed. How do you know? On the way back to his, Jean linked arms with her, leaning with all his weight and pressing his head into her shoulder. The walk was short and the afternoon warm. Children were out on the street. Someone screamed, and beyond was the thrum of Fulham Broadway. They rounded his road and walked past the small church. Dina looked up at the stained glass, blues, greens and reds, so full of light at this time of day. Her mother would say it had all gone to waste and the country was sinking with it. Set back from the pavement was a garden, roses and rhododendrons and, unfortunately, some carnations. On one side were the most shocking pink azaleas. As they approached them, she noticed the gaping hole where a bush should have stood. Someone had ripped it straight out. She looked down at Jean, but he was walking with his eyes closed, sunlight playing across his lids. She turned back to the garden. The exposed soil was soft and moist, and stray petals littered the opening, gone a bruised colour where they'd been trampled into the ground. And then they were past the church and approaching the steps of his house, and Katerina was already at the door, hand on chest, eyes upturned towards heaven, a prayer or admonishment or laugh poised on her lips. Jean let go of Dina, and she felt his warmth leave her body as he took the steps 2 at a time towards his mother.